Welcome NEC fans to day two of the NCAA Diversity and Inclusion social media campaign, where we're going to share why identities and experiences belong in the environment we are part of. Today, we are pleased to be joined by Jack Pinho, Sacred Heart's Assistant Athletic Director for Student Athlete Support Services, to have a conversation about the DE&I initiatives and the significant role they have played on their campus. So let's meet Jack.
Adrian, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be a part of this. Great that you guys are putting this on with the NEC. Like Adrian said, my name is Jack Pinho. I'm the Assistant Athletics Director for Student Athlete Support Services here at Sacred Heart University. Heading into, my second year here at Sacred Heart. And part of what we do in Student Athlete Support Services is we get to do a lot of work with DEI and mental health and academic side of things. And with NCAA Inclusion Week going on next week as well, we're highlighting a lot of things, and I'm excited to get into those details with you, Adrian, today.
Awesome. So happy to have you. Thanks for joining us. Let's get into this conversation. And I just want to present a question to you and basically just ask, how do you define belonging in your own words? What does it look like to you? What does it look like on your campus?
Yeah, I think when I hear the word belonging, I think the biggest thing that it feels like here at Sacred Heart for me personally, and I think for our student athletes have voiced this as well, is feeling valued. Feeling valued through whether it's the positive connections they're having on campus, or having a sense of belonging within their team, but obviously outside of their team as well, when they're on campus and they're not identifying as a student athlete. They're identifying as Adrian, or they're identifying as Jack,
Mm.
what that looks like. And creating a space where our student athletes are comfortable in their own skin, I think is the biggest thing when we think of the word belonging, and creating that type of environment here at Sacred Heart, especially within our athletics programs.
That's awesome. I love that, just being comfortable in your own skin and taking that, like, whether it be off the field, off the court, out of the locker room, and into other places. That's awesome. I love how you put that. And based off what you said, so what should that your definition of belonging, right? Like, what should that feel like as a student athlete? Um, and why is that feeling important?
Yeah, I think that feeling should be, coming in with, it's with the culture of each of our teams. Each of our teams here have their own unique culture. Some
Mm,
is, preach that a lot. And I think, when you think of DEI, the diversity, the equity and the inclusion part of it, it's bringing that in, being comfortable in the locker room, right? Being comfortable when you're going to, the cafeteria, being comfortable when you're walking to the classroom, being comfortable approaching an administrator in an office, if there's something that they would like to discuss. And I think kind of creating that here on campus, and making sure that our student athletes feel comfortable when they're in their own space, they're in their own building, the way they feel on the court, and when they feel on the field or in the swimming pool, whatever their playing surface is when we go and watch them, that's the best time, because that's when that's when they're in their element. And what we strive to do is making that element kind of, also connect off of their playing field as well, where they can still have those real and raw organic conversations. And kind of bridging that gap, between student athletes and administrators, and, how
mm.
can support them the best, and having a sense of belonging here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I kind of want to stay with that, what you kind of ended with, right? Bridging that gap between the student athletes and the administrators. Can you just share anything? Can you shed more light on that, on how you personally, or like what your athletic department is doing actively to bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think, a big part of that, and I think, kind of what we do, which is really nice, and you're a big part of this as well, is our SAC group.
Mm,
That's a lot of our student leaders that get nominated by their coaches, or that want to join the group. It's one of our largest student athlete groups on campus as well,
mm.
with over 60 student athletes, in that group, and coming from, 33 different teams as well. We have a variety of teams at Sacred Heart, so we like to use that to our advantage. And in those SAC meetings, there's opportunities for them to voice themselves, things that they are liking on campus that they want to continue to see, or if there's things that they haven't seen on campus yet that they want to see. And how can we elevate this to higher ups? How can we get support? How can we get additional resources for the things that our student athletes are passionate about? And a lot of that comes into DEI. We have a group that's called Every Heart is Sacred. That's our DEI group. And that was formed by, our student athletes here on campus. And we have
Wow.
shirts that have "Every Heart is Sacred" on the back of them. And when we have games where a lot of our teams here are doing, DEI games where they'll wear those shirts during warmups, and SAC will be invited to it, and we're highlighting them at half times and after games. It's also making that promise to that the student athletes see it and feel it on campus, and that having our administrators come in and speak with SAC as well is really important. Showing our student athletes that it's a 9 o'clock on a Monday night, and our athletic director Julianne is here to come speak with you about real response. That's an automated system that we've created where students can anonymously report things without having their name attached to it, just to kind of also bridge that gap where they may not feel comfortable having that face-to-face conversation. They can bring it up anonymously, and then the conversation can get elevated, and hopefully if they feel comfortable enough, we can move forward with the situation. That's something that we've also helped student athletes with on the communication side, and that's positive, and things that need to be improved as well.
Mm.
Something that we incorporated last year and that we take very seriously here as well. And I think that helps with a sense of belonging as well to some sort of aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing like that. It seems like Sacred Heart has a clear goal, right? This student-led body, the SAC group that you guys have, but for the admins to, like you said, how it's 9 o'clock on a Monday night, just the support and the backing and the open communication that there is. It seems like Sacred Heart's administrative department, athletic department is taking action, right, and bridging that gap for these student athletes to have that sense of belonging and inclusivity. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Um, how does belonging ultimately affect how our student athletes navigate the spaces around them, right? They have this sense of belonging now, right? They feel comfortable within their teams and on their campus. How does that affect how they enter into these spaces, that they're part of?
I think it starts with, their confidence level too. And
Mm.
also, the biggest thing we preach here is just the communication aspect. We don't know something's wrong. We don't know if something, needs attention unless it's communicated, right? We can't just assume things. So we really try to preach the communication and that open willingness that, this is a safe space for you to be, and that, if there's something that needs to be, addressed, that, you can have that open line of communication. And, I think I just remember being a student athlete, and I think, one of the advantages is that we have a lot of people at Sacred Heart where they were student athletes before. And I had a great experience as a student athlete, and I want to continue to give that back, for the ones that come after me. And I think that's part of the things is, just having those raw organic conversations when you ask a student athlete something different than, how was the game last night? It's more important than, how's everything at home? How are things going on campus? How are things, outside the classroom? Or like, do you feel like you're achieving your goals? Is there something that's holding you up? And I think that's where, we talk about bridging that gap where, we're interested in more than them than just a student athlete, right? That's where I think that inclusion comes in where, we want to know about your weekend. We want to know about how things are going outside of football or basketball or field hockey, whatever it may be. So I think creating that space of belonging as well to our student athletes from an administrator and coaching perspective as well, not just from their peers with other student athletes.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's just so cool, right, that as you mentioned, like student athletes becoming part of like the administrative side of Sacred Heart. And so like there's just these student athletes now can relate to you and to others, and the questions to ask because you were once there. So it does bridge that gap. Now they can relate. They're like, oh, he cares more than how my performance on the field, court, pool, wherever it may be, the track. Um, I think that's so cool, and I think that's a great point that you brought up. And then how you started it with that confidence, right? And then that leads to better communication, right? There's a trust. They feel like they belong, and they open up this communication. That's awesome. Thank you. All right. How does belonging contribute to the growth of an inclusive environment?
That's a great question. I think, when you think about, you know, how does belonging actually contribute to that? I think, when you feel like you belong somewhere, I feel like you will grow as an individual. And
Mm.
that's something that we really preach with a lot of our newer student athletes, a lot of our first years is, it's really hard. They're in that transition from high school to college. Our student athletes, we all have things going on outside of Sacred Heart as well. And I think when you want to grow an inclusive environment, it's also presenting those opportunities, presenting activities going on outside of their sport, presenting, things outside of SAC, community service initiatives, DEI initiatives on campus, things for them to attend and be a part of too, I think is where that belonging is really going to contribute to the growth aspect. And we're creating an inclusive environment with our staff. We're trying to do that as well, not just with our student athletes. So I think, when it comes from the top down and you're trying to student athletes too, it's also making sure that their opinion is heard and that their input is valued when, we're thinking of things of how to, create a more belonging, inclusive environment on campus.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you know, emulating it on the administrative side of a place of diversity from the top down. As these student athletes come to a school that kind of like practicing what they preach, or the environment is what they're encouraging to their student athletes. Like there's a diverse department, and now all these student athletes coming from everywhere and anywhere, from all types of backgrounds, they're going to feel that sense of belonging because there's going to be someone they can relate to that is, essentially like from the top, right? So that's so great. I love to hear that. Awesome. All right, this one's like a two-part question for you. So why is it important for people in your community to feel as if they belong despite a diversity of identities within the group? And how is your athletic community aiming to achieve belonging for all of those identities?
Yeah, even right now, I think, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and we're doing
Mhm.
work on campus where we're interviewing our student athletes who come from Hispanic backgrounds, and highlighting them on our main athletic Instagram and social media, and talking about why is their culture important to them, how do they bring that into where they are now at Sacred Heart, and how do they get to where they are from their upbringing, and what's important with their core values. And I think when we think about what we're doing as administrators and coaches, and embodying, and giving that sense of belonging, and being proud also where you're coming from too, which is really hard. And sometimes that's a barrier. I had as a student athlete is, do I want to share my personal experiences? Are people going to care about my personal experiences? Does that really matter? And it does matter. That's how it's gotten you to where you are. It's gotten you to Sacred Heart, being proud of that, getting that acceptance letter when you got that open, being able to play Division I sport, having that opportunity is, when it comes down to it, we're all here for the same reason. We all put on
Mhm.
jersey, it all says the same thing on the front. I think what's important too is, you know, you are playing for, the name on the back and being proud of that, but there is something that unity that brings us together. And I think that's a huge sense of belonging, is not overlooking the belonging aspect, but like having a team, right? Coming from all different parts of the world and coming to work and achieve after the same goal is something that those identities, it doesn't matter what your identity is, you're all working towards, a main goal and a main purpose, which sometimes we look so hard into these things, and then sometimes it's like the greater overview that we need to focus on.
Absolutely. That was awesome. That was really well put. I love that. Oh man, that was great. And can you share some of the DE&I work that you've done to make this inclusive environment at Sacred Heart?
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait. This comes at a great time with, the DEI, our NCAA Inclusion Week. This is something that I got involved with right when I started at Sacred Heart, and, got to work with, our DEI group. And now Tracy, who's our student athlete sports services coordinator, has kind of taking on that initiative, and she is hitting the ground running. I mean, she has the next 3-4 days of next week lined up where we do, an identity wheel activity with our student athletes where, they can, figure out different identities that they have and how they can highlight them together, and they can share them with other student athletes, which is really cool. We're also doing understanding the why, and why should you support others with different identities. That's going to be something we're working on. We're doing the belonging, we're doing activities with I belong because, and we're interviewing and showcasing student athletes with different backgrounds on campus, different diverse backgrounds, and why do they feel, in fostering, inclusive excellence, why is that important to them within their team and within Sacred Heart as well. And these are just things that we have going on as well. And then when it's not NCAA Inclusion Week, how do we continue that trend, right? How do we one-stop shop, right? Which is important. And I think having the DEI games as well, where we have different teams doing our DEI games and inviting different offices or different departments from campus to get involved. We have Rob Johnson, who is our director of the Multicultural Center here on campus, who was a former student athlete on the football team. So using him, now he's in this role back here at Sacred Heart, and using him as a figure where we can get the Multicultural Center involved and getting them involved with games. He has a big part in this NCAA Inclusion Week. So it's really just using our resources that we have here, and making sure that it's not just a one-stop shop, and that we're continuing, throughout the academic year, where our student athletes are like, oh, we got this going on next, and then we have that going on, and then we're highlighting this. So I think our communications and our department does a really good job with, making sure that when it is Hispanic Heritage Month or when it is Black History Month, and we have things coming up throughout the year. We had National Coming Out Day yesterday, where half our department, our teams were there for our student athletes that have either came out or are struggling with it, and how are we supporting that as a university as well, which is really important in that inclusion piece. So there's a ton of stuff going on campus, which is really great, and I think I'm just excited to be a part of the movements and to help support our student athletes. Just because I get to work with our student athletes every day. That's the best part of what I get to do, is the face-to-face interaction.
Wow, that's wonderful. Seems that Sacred Heart has a plan, and they're executing that plan, taking action, and making sure that it's not sprinkled here and there, but that the student athletes throughout the year are aware of some of the DE&I work that is happening around. That's awesome. That's great. And then finally, last thing I'm going to ask is, what would you like to see grow on campus to further the sense of belonging?
That's a great question. I think I would just like to see, the events that we have, like that I was kind of mentioning, I would like to see those grow bigger than what they are. Maybe getting more of our whole teams involved, maybe than just groups. Like I said, I think Sacred Heart, and it's not like me being biased, I think Sacred Heart does a really good job of, making sure that we're using the resources that we have, and that we're, creating opportunities for our student athletes to create, like at the end of the day, where we want to create this sense of belonging in this new environment that you're in. And which is hard too, because it's a short environment, right? We get the student athlete for 4 years. So within that crucial 4 years, it's so important that we're creating a space that, is equal and it's inclusive. And like I said, the biggest things is our student athletes is being comfortable in their own skin. So I think if I would like to see something grow, it's just the events that we have to get bigger. I think what we're doing right now is great and is important, but I'd be lying if I say we can't always do more, right? There's always more that we can do. So I think, just growing those events and highlighting them more for our student athletes, and just creating more ample opportunities for our student athletes to be a part of that.
Amazing. And that is all the time we have for today. Thank you, NEC fans, for joining us as we recognize the administrators who dedicate their time to the goals of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging within our conference. We will see you next time on the NEC Overtime Pod.